So, what might be something that comes to mind from last chapter when we think of forces? It's a push or a pull. Most forces exist in pairs, okay? So, when we are pushing something or pulling something, they are interacting in constant interaction with one another. Okay, so force and acceleration, they are tied together, and what we see down here, your new formula that you will be writing down here shortly. Hopefully this year, maybe Minnesota is going to be a force in the NFC North. Well, see, I keep thinking Dallas is in the NFC South. No, they're in the NFC East. It's kind of strange how some of these conferences are lined up. It used to be Carolina was actually in the NFC West at one point. I'm serious. In their first year as an expansion franchise, Carolina Panthers were part of the NFC West. Okay. But what also happened, there used to be 3 divisions, now there's 4. That probably doesn't matter to, and maybe, not everyone likes the same interests in here. Some of you could say, well, I like racing, and in just my opinion, I can go without it on the weekends. But some of you maybe enjoy watching NASCAR, or you call it the NASCAR series and the Winston Cup. Is that what the 2 types are? I don't know. That's why I'm asking. Does anyone follow racing in here? Is that correct? The Winston Cup standings and the NASCAR standings? But what's kind of, I'm not saying silly, but if you know anything about racing, how does the season start? With the Indianapolis 500? No. It's the other one, which is what? I think it takes place down in Florida, right? Daytona 500. So they start out the season with the biggest race. Then they all get, and that's neither here nor there. But regardless, okay? We had seen Newton's first law, and that dealt with this concept. It was called, starts with the letter I. Inertia. In other words, object at rest stays at rest, or once it's in a path of travel, it will continue until it's acted upon by an outside force. In other words, well, what happens if you scoot something along the floor, whether it's a coin or that of a marker? If there's an outside force that we can't see, why does this eventually slow down and come to a stop? Friction between what? In the object. Well, there's something called, the 2 objects are coming in contact with one another, but there's something else acting upon that as well that's slowing it down besides the friction. Gravity is continually pulling down on that as well. See, gravity has a greater effect on some people than others. That's this guy here. Why does gravity have a greater effect on me than it does you as individuals? I've got a larger what? Larger mass. Now, is that larger mass all muscle? You try to keep that straight face. No, it's not all mass. Okay, so I'm not. I used to be in probably a better shape, but well, we try cross country practice. Of course, when I say we, I shouldn't say I try my best. I can't keep up with you people. Maybe at one time used to be able to, but how many of you think in about 30 or 40 years, age will just be a number? Once you turn into 46, it's just a number. It's not going to slow me down on my profession, what I'm going to do. And some of you might not have a choice in that matter because some of you are farmers, right? How many of you think once you graduate high school, I'm going to start farming? Okay? And that's fine and dandy. And typically, you know, there's things that have to be done on the farm that maybe used to be easier at one point than another. Even for me, maybe it would be climbing in and out of the tractor, for instance. We have to put another step on there. I don't know. Sometimes that first step might be all the way up here, especially for some of this larger equipment, especially if you have a nice green looking. Now, it's not that you rolled your eyes, but that's just the impression that I get. The only reason I do that is because we've had conversations with your older brother about that too. Just think of if and when he gets out into the farming world, will it be a sad day if he comes rolling home with a John Deere? You don't have to worry about that day. Why is that? Because it just won't happen? You know, I'm willing to bet that, well, this is sports, I know, but maybe New England thought the same thing last year with Philadelphia. Or maybe that's what the Democratic Party thought back in 2016, as opposed to the Republican Party. I didn't mean to do that. Okay? So, sometimes you never know what's going to happen until it actually takes place. Feel nice to get that boot off, just to have it on. Is that a yes or a no? Well, to me, that probably means yes. It's fine. Okay. All right. All right. Okay. Anyway, I told Mrs. Olson that I'd let you go back over. We got done. Is the junior high choir done? No? Okay. Does that mean anything to you two who did come and talk to me earlier? No? Should they go back? Okay, that's all I needed. See, I don't remember you telling me you're going to be gone. Oh, okay, that's probably why. 3 days ago. Okay? I just don't remember that. Okay? Fair enough. And now, what we want to look at is, for instance, did someone get 2 copies of this? Because I thought I had hit 20 when I made all these copies. But I'll go ahead and make one now. Okay. Did you 2 tell me 3 days ago and I just forgot? No? Okay, fair enough. Okay. So, what we want to do now is as follows. Okay. See, doesn't some of these diagrams, don't they just look pretty because you got all these different colors? Can't read it. Oh. Why are you sitting in the cheap seats then? Huh? It's a depiction of your nervous system. All right. So, in this case, all right, how many of you, and we've only made reference to this, we've never put this into a problem sense, but has anyone in here ever had to have heavy equipment moved on or off your farm, delivered on or hauled off of your farm place? Okay? So what would happen is, whether it's a type of implement, that means something that you pull behind, or maybe it's one of your tractors, for instance. Okay, tractor gets put onto, no, let's say it's an implement instead. It's going to be one of your, maybe it's a new planter that's going to be delivered. Okay, so when that pulls up on your yard, the piece of equipment is just not sitting on the semi-trailer with nothing else on it, is there? Say that again. Yeah, it's chained on with binders. So when typically, as that's going down the road, there should be enough weight to hold that piece of implement on the trailer. But if that is the case, what are the chains and binders for? To make sure that it doesn't bounce, because typically what happens, that downward and then upward motion going down the road would be enough to topple that piece of equipment off the semi-trailer. Okay, so with that, let's say, for instance, in the process of moving heavy equipment, give me a number between 100 and 200. 76. Someone say 75. 175, okay? Okay, so this planter's on a flatbed. Okay? How much force is being exerted on your formula sheet? We want you to do this. We talked about it just briefly, but where you have all your formulas wrote down or written, we want to make sure that you have this formula down. Okay? So, we know mass is measured in what? Kilograms. Accelerations are measured in what? Meters per second squared. Okay? Then, have you ever discussed density problems in 8th grade or in elementary? a derived unit means you got two labels of measure that are derived. They come from one another to make a different label. That's with meters per second. That would be a derived unit. Meters per second squared is a derived unit. But in this case, forces are measured in what we call newtons. Just capital N means newtons. It's a derived unit. It is a kilogram per meter per second squared. Kind of like a momentum as well, which is also a kilogram dash meter over second, not a meter per second squared. Okay? So this is a derived unit from these measurements. Okay. So in some of these instances where you were solving for some of these story problems, it would say this happened beginning from rest. Your parked car, beginning from rest, was a velocity. And that velocity was what? Your parked car. 0. At least we hope it's not moving. Because if it's not moving, your parking pin isn't working, and then you got to go running after it, making sure it doesn't run over someone's cat or dog or something like that. Okay. So in this case, we are not given some information, but it's in the problem that you want to use your physics intuition here. Just like your algebraic intuition that we all have, right? Yes? No? Awesome. Okay, so we've read the problem. The next thing you should do is what? Okay, so what do we know in this problem? We know the mass, which is what? Okay? Now, there's something that is not in that problem where you need to use this intuition. What did we say is holding that implement on that trailer besides the chains and binders? Think back to this marker. We said it's going to keep rolling. Gravity is holding that on. And gravity has a value of what? Is that right? Squared. Did we catch any of you sleeping on one of those, that perhaps a multiple choice question? You'll notice that it says we label acceleration as, you had the following choices. Sometimes, if we're in a hurry, oh, there it is, meters per second. You put A. So maybe we caught some of you sleeping, maybe we didn't, but it's just the idea, it's meters per second squared. So then what is the question ultimately asking? The what? The force. Okay? And we don't know. So, what is the formula tell you to do to calculate the force? Okay? So, we've got force equals the mass, which was 17,500 times what? Times 9.8. Okay. Hopefully you can read that. Force 17,500 times 9.8. Maybe that helps out a little bit. Okay. So you just multiply them two. So the force is what then? Somewhere thereabouts, we'll just say that. And how are we going to label that? Newtons. Right there. Newtons. Okay? So, when we do get to this activity, what do you know about the arch design? Is every arch going to be designed the same way? The answer to that is no. Okay, and we've seen pictures of this. There's some people maybe like this college football team. There's a Disney movie named after them. It's a church over in Europe. No. It could be a Cinderella team, that's true. Say that again. Notre Dame, or however you pronounce it. Okay? So, when we typically think of an arch, can I erase this? Is there any questions over it? Okay. So, when we typically think of an arch, what does it look like? Probably the only thing that's coming to mind is McDonald's, right? The golden arches. Or you could say almost a half a circle. Okay? So what's happening, that is the typical Roman arch right there. So what's happening is there is large amounts of load. That's a physics term. These arches have to carry a load on here. And sometimes, like the Roman Colosseum, okay? The span going on that arch carries the load. That's how it's been able to stand up for, I don't know, it was built in maybe, let's say, what, 58, maybe it's 100 AD, so well over 2,000 years that Colosseum is still standing. But, again, not all arches are designed the same. Some of them, I don't know if this might be a little drastic, but kind of like a Gothic arch. It looks something like this. Okay? And these all have individual pieces. Okay? And then here you have something called the keystone. And these would all have individual pieces as well. And what's happening is the forces that are being exerted down on here, as long as that's maintained inside of the legs, that will stand. But if those forces get on the opposite side, bad things can happen. Okay. So, we will be seeing a video about this next week. These vocab terms, some of you may have started them already. I haven't assigned them yet, but maybe later on next week at the earliest would be when they are due. Okay? So, we will continue with this next week.